And so, do we want to start with Chris? Do you want to introduce yourself and then Craig?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, David. Chris True. I've been working in the leisure industry for a while. GLL, so sports development, then GLL, then Fusion Lifestyle, Virgin Active, and then Parkwood as in their Welsh contract, and then head of business development for a while, but self-employed since 2019. Um, I met Craig when we were competitors when he was at Serco bidding against each other. And after I went self-employed, we found ourselves working on multiple projects, and we started working on Greenlight. Well, Seal for about 2.5 years ago, wasn't it, Craig?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Apologies, folks. I just had to nip out to the window cleaner arrived. Casualty of working from home, so we needed the side gate opening. Apologies about that.
Just an intro, Craig.
Just
Yeah,
interested.
absolutely. Yeah, hi all. I know some of you on the call, but for those that don't, I think Chris has just alluded to it. Yeah, my role in the sector really was focused on business development, but started life as a fitness instructor in the mid '90s, and worked all the way through the sort of the management and then regional management within SLM before becoming involved with business development. Um, in business development terms, was obviously responsible and being very involved with the development of SLM in the early days, and obviously that's how I know Dave. And we sort of took the business, which is now known as everybody knows as Everyone Active, from around about sort of 25, 30 sites through to sort of 75, 80 sites before I left to then go to do a similar role for Serco. And throughout all of that time, involved with working in many sort of different complex contractual situations, trying to win business in the sector in the trust early days, and also when presenting in boardrooms, finding yourself having to answer similar questions on a constant basis. And that sort of theme really is carried on throughout, trying to convince boards that the bid that you're writing, the bid that you're trying to win new business for, is comparable in many ways to either existing business or different types of business out there, so that you can provide a benchmark that says what you're saying and what you're actually trying to get across is the right message. So all the way through kind of business development, we struggled with that a little bit in terms of SLM early days. We got better at it as we went. And the same was true when looking at national sports centres within Serco. It's very difficult to benchmark some of the national centres. So the concept of Greenlight, whilst Chris is right, we've been working on it in terms of an actual product for the last couple of years. It's deeper rooted than that. So what we're going to show you this morning is really the efforts of lots and lots and lots of years of trying to have the right solution in front of you when you're convincing teams, project teams, boards, trust boards, etc., of how the idea that you're trying to get across is grounded in the right information and the right data. Hopefully that helps, but gives you a bit of an insight into of how long I've been in the sector as well. So when I first knew Dave, I had hair, and I now no longer have hair, Dave. So yeah, we've gone full circle. But nice to meet everybody.
Brilliant, Craig. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I always enjoyed working with you. It was a real pleasure growing that business together and doing the stuff that we did together. It was
Yeah.
tough, hard work, but good fun. So, do you want to share a screen, Craig? Have you got a presentation you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris is going to do the sort of the hold the wheels, if you like, and
Okay.
we're going to talk together through that. If that's okay for us to give us free reign of that. Do we
Yeah.
need some sort of permissions for Chris to do that, or are we
I
okay to?
think I've just done it.
Yeah, okay, brilliant.
I think. Um, can you see my screen now? Is
We
it?
can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think the easiest way to start, everyone, is why Greenlight's here and what Greenlight is. So Greenlight, there's multiple versions of Greenlight, but what we're going to show you today is focus on today is feasibility studies for new build uh, sport and leisure facilities. So it doesn't. First thing to say is it doesn't replace the traditional feasibility study, the detailed feasibility study. Um, it's a very early stage tool to guide decision making and ensure that we try and avoid abortive costs. Because, you know, Craig mentioned there, but we've worked on multiple new build projects across leisure and other industries, actually. But the amount that get to design stage and then the designs come back and the building is too expensive and you have got to reset. So what we're trying to do is with Greenlight is trying to set expectations early so that design is better informed and more likely to go ahead, or in this case, be given the green light to go ahead, hence the name. So, Dave, I am not sure how I now like unshare and reshare that because I've got to move to. I think it's always better to show you the product. Can you see it now?
Not just yet, Chris. It's coming back.
What about now?
Back now, yeah, coming through. Yeah.
Here we go. So, hopefully, you've all seen business intelligence software before and use it, but effectively, it allows you to work interactively. And what we do is we drop a pin on the map, so where a location is for a potential facilities, and we match that location with our extensive benchmarks, looking at demand analysis, looking at competition analysis, but also building in specific cost data for facility in that area. And what that allows us to do, and this is set up for a place in Oxfordshire, and demand is quite high. But for example, if I just build a forecourt sports hall with a 80 station gym, I'll add a group exercise studio here. You can see my cost here is coming out at 6.9 million. Here, I've got a flag saying we're under prescribed because we haven't got any car parking spaces in here. 50 just about does it. There we go. Cost is there. I can add a 25-meter pool. Everything changes. Now, if I wanted to add a teaching pool as well into this location, let's do a 15 by 10. I'm overprescribed there as well, because what we're doing here is we're linking to the Sport England facility planning model, and it's saying within the area you don't need that much water space, so we don't need a teaching pool. What we might be able to do is get away with an extra 2 lanes. Oh no, we can't. So yeah, 6 lane 25 is all we need.
Just to jump in quickly then, Chris. So just on that though, obviously if you can cast your kind of mind into the where you might be using this type of tool, there's always going to be somebody in that meeting, in that board, in that trust board that's going to be asking questions. And rather than in lots of circumstances, the person that's presenting has to take that information away. Okay, well, you'd like a teaching pool. Let me go away and consider that. It's always a challenge because the person that's asking the question would like to know what's the impact if we had a teaching pool to this particular facility mix. In historic terms, you take that information away, you go and do your modeling, you spend hours and hours on your Excel workbook to try and make that then that additional thing added into your overall financial plan. What we're doing here is, as you can see, Chris is moving sliders and interactively changing the facility mix literally on the hoof, and it's all preset. So we know that there's a whole heap of benchmarks behind this that gives us clarity that it's the right answers to their questions. So, Dave, if you were back in the day in that SLM boardroom asking me the question, well, actually, what happens if we take 80 stations to 100 stations? What's the difference? Can we make that facility a bit bigger? Rather than me going away, I'll tell you next week, Dave, when we get back together. I'll tell you now, and you can see the impact. This is the real beauty of this tool. It is so interactive and so quick. And you can throw questions at it. So back to you,
Chris. Could you put a 50-meter pool in? So I'm just thinking of all the countless
Yeah,
conversations I've ever had with members.
yeah.
Who say, can we have to make a poll?
It will definitely do that, and it'll definitely flag that it's over provided, Andy.
Yay! We'll have it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's an interesting one because we've had this come up very recently,
Yeah,
and obviously this is you might have seen me playing with this figure around the bottom here, and what this is interest-free capital that the council can bring to the table, so we can in basically model borrowing up to 30 million on this, but it can be flexible, and also the term of borrowing we can change that as well, and see the impact.
yeah. So that yeah,
There.
the interest-free capital might be in form of a grant, it might be in Section 106 money, etc., etc. And then on top of that, you need to then play with the borrowing and the term of the borrowing to try and fill the gap to keep the numbers green.
Yeah, and you might have seen this whole life cost aspect. So what we're trying to provide to clients is a view of how much the building will actually cost over the life of it. Because obviously, we've worked with feasibility studies for a long time and delivering them, and we've seen a lot. And what they sometimes do is deliver a snapshot in time. And what we want to do is give a realistic view of how much a building's going to cost over time. And effectively, this is the expenditure line here. You can see that it grows slowly over time, and the income here is slightly profiled as well. And this is the life cycle pot growing. And as the borrow, so if I come back to the front sheet, that's probably a better example. If I just take the borrowing down to 25 years. You can see as the borrowing repayments drop off, the profitability increases. But obviously, as the building gets older, it gets more expensive to run. In addition to that, we've got the ability. So, for example, in here, site-specific costs. You might have we have a conversation with clients, and they go, "Oh, you've not taken into account the need for a new electricity substation. That we've had a quote for 500K." We just put it in here and answer that question and say, well, that's the impact on the project. And we can make some adjustments based on anything they say in terms of, they want a bigger studio. They want a bigger leisure pool. They want a bigger soft play, change the yields as well. We can flip between operating models as well. So for a local authority, they can see the impact. What this model doesn't do, in its current form, is give the Lambton leisure model, which is the LATCO with agency model. However, we do have the ability to do that. We just haven't had a request to see that yet, so it's not been integrated into this. Construction date as well, so we can change, again, going back to my comment around snapshot in time, we can change the date in which we expect the construction to start and the price changes. Because we deal with a lot of projects, and we're dealing with one right now where a price was submitted in 2021, and shock horror, that when actually the project's coming to be onboarded, it's increased by over £1 million. Participation has been built in based on benchmarks, and social value. And social value uses TOMS, and basically, which is what majority of our local authority clients are using. So we're kind of talking the same language there.
Yeah.
You can see as well, guys, you see this here in the top right-hand corner. This has all gone red. And what that is, this is a bit of a safety net. And it's saying that based on all the benchmarks that we have, this business model was far too racy for that specific area. So it needs to be toned down. It's probably to do with the 50-meter pool, to be fair. So I bring it down, and this is quite a healthy catchment. You can see within 10-minute drive, we're okay. Within the 15, we're slightly over. Within the 20, we're things. So you might look at this and go, I'm going to take the risk on that. I don't know if there's specific house building, population growth projections, and take a risk on that.
Yeah.
However,
there's a question just come into the chat, Chris, about that from Andy, about can it deal with housing growth and so on, and absolutely, this is where we deal with that, Andy. So This is where we're looking at projecting what the local plan is saying, what the housing developments look like. That's often linked to Section 106 agreements anyway. So obviously you're looking at what they are looking to invest, and we're working on countless schemes where you've got developers that are trying to prove, what's the impact of 350, 500 homes, whatever, and that fail safe in the top right hand corner allows us to make sure that the business plan doesn't become too racy in the 10, 15 and 20-minute catchments, and you can see them flicking. Some of them will go green, some of them go red. Just depends on what sort of level of people we are looking to try and influence here.
And we're also we have the ability, and we've argued for a long time about this, but in the old days of Excel, you'd run a macro and say what's the best mix for that area in terms of the bottom right hand corner. And we have the ability to do that as well, to actually, before we go in with the client, understand what the model is saying is the best mix, the most efficient build. But, I think everything being green in here, it doesn't have to be that, because, some councils will take the view based on the social value. And that's absolutely fine. But some councils that we work with are very much focused on the financial aspect, whereas others are more about the impact, as you all know.
Yeah. Chris, another question in the chat that's come in is about whether this tool can effectively provide a blueprint for what is required in that local authority area. I think that's the question, Dave. I think the answer to that is this is probably a good point to remind everybody that Greenlight is a tool that helps the early phases of a feasibility study to help make sure the client makes the right decision. It gives them a cost envelope at the front end, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't replace some of the diligent work that you must do to prove planning positions, to prove Sport England's requirement, you have to still follow some of those additional steps in terms of a traditional feasibility study. But what Greenlight does provide is it provides that upfront, this dashboard that you're looking at right now provides that upfront cost certainty that you're going to be in the right ballpark. It allows you to utilize it throughout the feasibility study to check and challenge, to move it around, to interactively talk to your project teams as workshops, and so on. And in particular, when you are talking about the overarching facility need for the area, you can see what impact, like as Andy's question was quite right, quite consistently we get asked in these meetings, in particular by council members, what happens if we have a 50-metre pool, because we'd love a 50-metre pool. We can play those scenarios out in real time. So it doesn't replace the detailed, diligent work that needs to happen, but it definitely complements and definitely supports. If that answers your question, Dave.
Can I just expand on the question, Craig? It's just,
Yeah.
I'm working within a local authority. They've currently got 3 sites. There's an officer belief that they really only need 2 sites, north and south. Would this be because I think Chris said this is linked to the Sport England planning model, which means it does look at the facilities that already exist. Are you able to take those facilities out so that you can then look at the region with no leisure centres in and say, actually, is a north and a south feasible here?
Yeah, Chris is going to answer the question now, absolutely, in terms of visually. But yeah, I think the answer is yes, it can, and obviously the way in which you do that is complementing some of that diligent work that you would do as a feasibility study anyway, but using Greenlight as a tool to assist that. So, Chris, I pass it back over to you, because I'm sure you're going to explain that in terms of what you're looking at now.
Yeah, so we've got basically there's 4 Greenlight products, guys. There's Greenlight feasibility study, which you've seen. There's Greenlight options appraisal, which is what we're showing here. So this is a 2 council contract, and we've got the current performance here, and we've got the modeled performance. So this has been developed to allow a council to look at what they potentially could get back from a procurement process, or if they took it in-house, if they convert it to a LATCO, if they went to an agency agreement, as an example. We can, on this one, for example, we can flex what happens if the electricity tariff goes down, gas tariff goes down, water, also impact of decarbonisation projects. In addition to that, we've got the ability to flex, different models in terms of operating profits, central costs, and also the impact of VAT changes with the agency agreement. But what we've got in here, Dave, is the ability to turn on and turn off centres from a contract.
Absolutely brilliant.
But what we have the ability also to do is link to the feasibility study project and bring on board that specific new development. So, as part of new centre feasibility opening, we might close centres 8 and 11.
Yeah,
that's the impact.
And we do the diligent work around, in your circumstance, Dave, the north and the south. We'd look at what's in there in terms of a private club perspective, what's in there from an outdoor perspective, what are the provisions in there from just from a health and wellness and physical activity perspective generally, to make sure that what we're saying and what the numbers and the data saying is stacking up. Because obviously there's always a few nuances, isn't there, within anything in terms of north and south divides I'm assuming it's the district authority. I think I can guess which one it is actually, but I won't go into that. But yeah, I think in terms of the of that, you would then work with Greenlight to produce a report that obviously would assist that local authority to make those decisions and allow them to help them to make those decisions. So this is a really interactive tool, which is great within council chambers where they are throwing questions at you, for example, in that same, because it is quite politically charged, as we know, and closing down facilities, and rationalising facilities has been quite a theme for a number of years. And we think with the local government organisations rearranging themselves, shall we say, at the minute, I think this is going to become even more prevalent, in relation to looking at when larger authorities come unitaries and then merge with others. We are going to see that when there's going to be potentially 30, 40 facilities that come together. How do you decide? And actually, that's healthy in some respects, because catchments are often not bound by local authority demarcation on a map, are they? They're defined by catchments of people rather than of local authority ward maps or whatever. So there's lots to this that can really help. Chris, back to you. I think you've zeroed it on the basis probably you're now going to ask any questions, I guess.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one last thing, really, is just based on the start of the conversation where we joined in around the pivot to well-being. So a recent project where we worked on, Greenlight actually flagged a serious red on a project which had been, I think every man and his dog had to go at doing a feasibility study on it for a new build. But Greenlight said very clearly it's not viable to build a new leisure centre in this area. There's just simply not enough chimney pots and not enough demand with the event, and the available capital that they had to play with just wouldn't work. However, it did work with the health centre being brought in, the library being brought in, the community centre brought in. So we developed a Greenlight with specific usage and revenue expenditure related to those facilities coming under one roof, and the capital 106 contributions relating to that actually made the whole project viable, and that's undergoing the next stage and moving towards REBA stage 2 and 3 at the moment. Bit complicated with local government reorganisation, but they've got a path forward of what they can do. Yeah, so any questions?
Damn, John's being polite.
Yeah, always, Dave. Andy, sorry, yeah. You just actually taken the question that I answered the question I was going to ask Chris about whether you've got a dashboard and a model that works on an integrated hub basis with libraries and GP surgeries. So is that flexible to the extent that you can kind of use it at the very early stages to say what are the aspirations? Let's put it into the model and see what comes out, and also further down the model to say, look, we thought maybe we wanted a library, but actually it doesn't look like we can afford it. So that was the first question. Obviously, you can do that. The second question, if I may, just quickly, is where the benchmarks come from, because I can see that data is king, isn't it, really, and having that confidence on that. So without breaking any trade secrets, could you tell us a bit more about where the data comes from, the benchmarks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that, John. No problem at all to answer the question. I think the simple answer is Chris and I have built up data over the years, which I think has started at the start of this sort of conversation since of my background, which I know you know, but and also through the years of working with clients, we have built up key performance indicators from that data. Obviously, there's data protection in place that we can't utilize that data per se in terms of openly, but we can use it anonymously in terms of benchmarking. And Greenlight has also very recently, in the last few months, we've signed with the sports consultancy an exclusivity deal, which allows us access to their data, and again in the same sort of way. So that, they've got access to multiple years of data from a consultancy perspective. So we're now sitting on about 1,250 data records of sites across the UK. When you think about how many leisure facilities we have in the UK, 1,250 of those are now within Greenlight, and that is growing, of course, as we develop. It's a pretty big data set. It is anonymized, so we only use the indicators as a consequence of that data. But it helps us to define those catchments, those areas, because it's all been categorized and it's all been worked through and cleansed so that we look at the catchments. We've used an interactive tool called SMAP'em. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but I'll let Chris explain what SMAP'em is, because he works with it greater than I do. But SMAP'em is a really interactive tool to help us with the catchment elements. So again, we're matching that up. So go for it, Chris, in terms of SMAP'em.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a tool that's very much used by franchisees, sort of, to determine areas and things like that. It's a French company, but they're delivering in massive in the US and UK. But it allows us to do drive time and specific drive time based on. So, for example, we did. I used to live in North London, so I know the area well, and I understand that a drive time in North London is very different to a drive time to me, but it takes that into account. Whereas a lot of, again, going back to a lot of feasibility studies that we see, they either take a radius, or do a drive time, which is just based on best case scenario. And what with SMAP and what it allows us to do is link to gather the IMD household data, break down sort of health indicators as well. And when we're matching benchmarks to the specific drop of the pin, we match them based on those indices. So we would never compare Berwick Leisure Centre always baffles me. It kind of, the size of it should be in the middle of London. But I don't know if anyone's visited, but lovely bowls hall on the top floor. But I think within a 20-minute drive time, there's about 12,000 people there. So we would never compare Berwick to a central London, for example. At the same time, a Samwell with its its areas of multiple deprivation, we wouldn't compare that with an Oxfordshire. So it allows us to match benchmarks, and in some cases we have, for one facility, we might have a location, we might have 20 relatable benchmarks. Sometimes we might have fewer, but then between myself, Craig, and the sports and consultancy, we select the best benchmarks for that specific area, and then that powers Greenlight. We check it before we go live with the client, and also deliver a workshop with the client to make sure they're happy with what the outputs are before we go live.
I think just to to finalize the answer to the question, John, if a client came to us and said specifically we want to only look at our benchmarks in Greenlight, we could do that as well. So, if an operator, if a local authority said, right, we've got 7 sites, we only want to look at what's the trends within our 7 sites or our 50 sites or whatever it is, we the data, we can manipulate the data to put that into the right format to only look at those things. It's very flexible, is what we're saying. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I think Andy was next in terms of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I first of all, I think it's one of the best things I've seen for a long time. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Andy.
Well done to the pair of you. It's absolutely brilliant. And yeah, well, I've got 2 questions really. One is I think you've sort of answered this a little bit with John's question about the facility mix really. So the additional indoor provision I'm looking at here, if you wanted to refine that for specific ideas again, whether it's paddle courts or I don't know, Pilates and that sort of stuff, can you do that? Is there the flexibility to do that?
Yeah, these have changed massively. We've been asked about tag active and things like that. So the limitation is, Andy, but this is a limitation with any type of feasibility. If it, some things we have more benchmarks for than others.
Yeah,
and sometimes we just need to go with what the client feels is the right or where they think, and just provide that critical review with them, and we can input usage and revenue behind each of those facilities. And that's why you'll see, like soft play is a yes, no. Now the benchmarks behind soft play are fairly standard, to be fair. However, we've worked it back to be meters squared.
Yeah, okay.
Which again, if you think about how that works within our benchmarks and how many facilities there's a lot of work that's gone. This is where the 2.5 years of effort have gone in to try and link a meter squared to soft play. It's fairly easy with
it just depends, Andy, what you want, how you want to switch it on or switch it off again. If you want it to be binary like the soft play or the health suite is, for example, that could be paddle courts. Could be that you could replace the word squash courts that's on the screen to paddle courts quite easily, as long as you've got the benchmark information. Which obviously paddle, there is less information from a local authority perspective currently, but that will grow as the paddle sort of field gets bigger for us. So you could replace squash courts with paddle courts quite easily and say, right, okay, how many paddle courts do we need?
Yeah.
And
the very first, I'd say, first early version of Greenlight was actually a bike track.
In the Lincolnshire Wolds, I remember it well.
Right,
yeah. So again, it's this works for theatres, it works for culture, works for attractions, and that's where the linking with the options appraisal as well is quite interesting, because we can have that. We say we're leisure operators, but we're operating quite diverse facilities. We need to build those sort of services in, and we can within this system.
But thank you. My next question is more about how do I get my hands on it, to be honest. So as I say, I've seen it with the sports consultancy and the Whirl project, stuff like that briefly. I know they're involved there. But it'd just be interesting, maybe outside of this, just go, I can see so many uses for this. It's fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah,
happy to have a conversation, Andy, and take it forward from there. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for your comments. Darren was next, I think. Dave, I can only see a certain amount of people on my screen, so I'm assuming Darren was next.
Thanks, guys. Just to echo Andy's comments, I think this is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Darren.
Provides that foresight and that financial and potential assurance, and particularly looking at it, as Chris said, looking at it over the whole life cycle. It kind of has echoes of something I did donkeys years ago in hospitality, but this in terms of site potential and so on. But this is something light years ahead. So really good. The question I've got, because Andy's asked some of the key questions I was going to ask, was if you gave it, can it facilitate a scoping exercise if you gave it a geography and said would it identify gaps in provision and potential?
As it is, no, Darren, because it's relying on the needs analysis that's already existing. However, that's something that we are looking at the moment, because we are honestly, we see there's a massive opportunity there, particularly in for those of you that operate in coastal areas. I think there's some real weaknesses within the way we do things at the moment, which we think we can help with.
Yeah, that would be a logical next step. That would be a super tool to add on to it.
Yeah, and I think as part of that, Darren, comes a little bit back to what I was saying about the fact that Greenlight can't replace the full process that you go through when you complete a feasibility study. And bear in mind that some of these feasibility studies for new facilities in particular, when you're looking to put spade in the ground with a brand new facility, you are investing or having to investigate because you need to prove the concept, haven't you? From a whole heap of other reasons, not just financially. So it becomes a challenge, doesn't it? You in particular in some of those areas where you've got lots of provision, what do you close? That's a challenge. So yeah, it cannot replace all of that work, but I think it can definitely support and shortcut some of it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just so everybody's aware, what I'll do is when I send the recording round, I will copy Craig into the email so that if you want to talk to Craig direct, you can respond to that email. So Craig, I'll share that as part of that. Is there any more questions from anyone? Has anybody seen something or thought of something? Okay, so from my point of view, I think it's a fabulous tool, and that interaction bit, getting officers and members together in one room and going, right, we need to look at the provision over the next 10 years. How do you go about that interaction? Is that a day rate thing? Is it do you just charge to do that one piece of consultation and hope it leads to others? How do you interact with those organizations that would really value just informed decisions instead of I'm doing this because I've got an international swimmer who lives in my borough and I want a 50-meter pool. What's the interaction? What's the plan, Craig?
So I'm sure Chris will jump in a second to support this, but I think South Oxfordshire is a good example of that where we've done it recently. And actually, we gave some of the council members who were project team members access to the dashboard themselves because they didn't believe what we were telling them. And we said, right, okay, fine. In your own time, have access via an access code on email. Go in there yourself and have a look, play with the scenarios, etc., etc. We ran workshops. With actually, as you know, South Oxfordshire is two authorities, so Vale of Whitehorse and South Oxfordshire. So we had a little bit of inter council competitiveness going on as well. We allowed them to play with the dashboard. We allowed them to work with it, themselves and come up back with questions. We presented at various different stages of the committee process, etc., etc., in a very much different way as well, because some of it was about what to do with their management contracts, some of it was about what to do with their facilities, some of it was about what to do with their, some of their facilities they weren't sure about, etc., etc. So, there's lots of different ways in which but it is that, and in today's world, a lot of that was done via video calls, and they were watching a screen. Of course, it wasn't actually in person, whereas it probably would have been pre-COVID when they were all getting together for that. But we have had circumstances where it is on the screen, and we are interactively changing things as members are throwing questions at us. Chris, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone tries to break it. That's what they do. But so far, we see it as a challenge. I mean, the social value in the participation modules were added based on client feedback, and so was whole life cost. So we take it we take it as a sort of badge of honor when someone sees a way of improving it, really. And we had a session with Sport England, and that a module is being developed based on that as well, because it was around can we show when the building will be built, Now, we all know there's a million factors other than the build time in that, officer decision time, planning, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, we can show that if a client wants to see that. It's completely flexible. But yeah, I guess the crunch with Greenlight is squash courts is always a good one. I mean, I love squash. I can't play squash now because of my knees, like most people. But having that conversation and saying, look, this is the impact. You can have 2 squash courts, but if you have 3, it's going to cost you a little bit more. Plus, the needs analysis saying you don't need 3 in that area. And it's very, very telling how quickly people quieten up once they've seen it in front of them, rather than just saying something that they believe. It's evidence-based negotiation at the early stage, so that when it gets to the they spent 30,000-40,000 pounds on designs, someone can't just then go, well, let's add another 2 cross courts on. We've already ruled out that we don't need to, and we can't afford to.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chris. But when the chair of the Leisure Services Committee is the table tennis player, you're not always going to get any logic, but never mind. Andy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just another one. I've got loads of questions for us, but just one that comes to mind is it been used yet to assess whether to build new or to refurbish? Can you actually use this for the refurbishment type of things?
Yeah, we've used it for both, Andy. And again, it's just the way you set it up and the way you build it in, and building in existing trading performance into the background as well. So it's just about enhancement. I think generally what we didn't say during the presentation as well is that this has actually been tested. So all our pricing is done by qualified leisure, very experienced leisure QS, who we will announce publicly very soon. But he's done 30, 40 leisure projects, build projects in the industry, so very confident. But it's been tested independently, externally costed, and we've been within 5 and 10% on 2 projects. That the 2 projects that have actually done that. So from our perspective, from that very early stage, thinking that the council's gone down the route of spending big money on architects' designs and then cost consultancy to get price ready to go, to be within 5 to 10% of that in that window is we're quite happy with that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Anything else anybody would like to comment on? Question?
David, just from my perspective, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of Chris, just to say thank you for everyone's time this morning to allow us the opportunity. It is good to get involved with lots of different groups, and and obviously when you and I spoke about this, it was an obvious one to try and get involved with. So thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate everyone's time. It's great.
That's no problems at all. John, did you come off mute for a reason? John Argent?
No, I was just going to echo Andy's comments. Really, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And what I didn't say, we can have a chat offline, Chris and Craig. I do a bit of work as a sort of client officer with South Gloss Council, and we're going to be coming out at the end of an active wellbeing strategy review and trying to understand what we want, where, and when. So I'll link in with you offline, because I think this will be very helpful.
Great. Forward to chatting to you.
Yeah, and I'll be doing some intros as well, I think, Craig, for the situation I find myself in too. So I think there's an opportunity here. So brilliant.
Very good.
Good. Okay. Well, look, if there's nothing more, we won't hold on to your time. Thank you for attending. We will send the